our kids. So I would love to hear your thoughts in chat. Did any of these values particularly resonate for you? What would you add to the list? Feel free to add your comments here. I'll take a moment to see what folks add. And I do want to add that this morning's plenary was fantastic. It was really inspiring, and thinking about what it means to be authentic in the realm of education. How does that extend into the realm of not just kids in the classroom, but how we're supporting our families and growing as a community to support our kids. So I'll move on to the next slide. And thank you, Olivia, for highlighting linguistic diversity as an asset. I'm looking forward to talking more about that in a few minutes. So we've chosen to focus in on family engagement here, and I'm going to hand it over to Cecilia to continue on with our presentation.
Thank you, Vidya. So like Vidya said, we've chosen to focus on family engagement as a key lever for supporting academic achievement. Let's take a minute to understand why. Decades of research have shown that parents' involvement in student learning makes a meaningful difference. In fact, it has more than twice the impact on student test scores than the household income or even the parent's educational background. Other benefits of parent involvement include increased attendance, increased graduation rates, and lifelong benefits like improved social skills. With more guidance and active support from schools, all parents have the power to help children make significant academic gains. Family-school partnerships are key to improving student learning outcomes, but families need critical information from teachers and schools in order to engage. And this is what we'll really be focusing on today. We'd love to hear your thoughts in the chat. What do you think are the most effective ways to engage families in learning? Take about 30 seconds to write some things that you've done, if you're involved in education, or some things you've seen if you have children, to engage. Take another 15 seconds. I know it's super quick, guys, sorry, but you can continue adding back to school nights. Yeah, those are really fun to get to know the school teachers, the classroom. These are great. It's really wonderful at-home reading, counsel parents on how to advocate for their children. Great. Feel free to continue adding to the chat. I'm going to move on to the next slide. In 2016, Family Engagement Lab partnered with Oakland Unified School District to help the district engage families in learning. We learned that parents want to know, what is my child supposed to learn? How is my child performing? How can I support my child to perform well? To address these needs, we knew we needed to create a resource that provided a personalized experience, tools that support ongoing two-way communication with teachers, and ways to empower parents to feel capable of supporting their children. What we learned from a series of listening sessions led us to design FASTalk in a way that was tailored to the needs of Oakland families. As we think about what works, when it comes to family engagement, it is important to also note that parents want key information about what their children are learning at school from teachers. After all, teachers are a trusted source of information about student learning. Teachers recognize the value of families, and especially in high-need communities, they want help to effectively engage families. One example of a tool that provides families with high-impact tips and activities to support student learning is Family Engagement Lab's tool called FASTalk, which stands for Families in Schools Talk. For this next section, we will share more about FASTalk's features and how it incorporates the evidence-based family engagement strategies to unite Oakland schools and families to support kids. We will also highlight the amazing impact parents have created when schools invite families to partner with them. FASTalk is a family engagement tool that promotes equity and builds partnerships between teachers and historically underserved families by sharing engaging at-home activities and conversation ideas in the family's home language to reinforce classroom learning. FASTalk is not your typical communication tool because it's focused on learning and bridging the school-home link by activating the power of families in their preferred language. Through FASTalk, families receive weekly tips and activity ideas through SMS text messages to stay up to date with classroom learning. FASTalk helps schools and teachers reach all families in an equitable way and breaks down language barriers, saving teachers time with pre-scheduled activities that are automatically pushed out to families, build the capacity of parents and caregivers with easy, actionable, high-impact activity ideas to support their child's learning. The goal of FASTalk is to extend high-quality instruction from the classroom into the home and bringing awareness to parents around language and literacy connections so that they can build upon that knowledge through positive parent-child interactions at home. The messages are also tagged with the teacher's name, so it's also an opportunity for parents to ask their child's teacher any questions or concerns that may come up through FASTalk's two-way translated messaging. Here's an example of a week of FASTalk messages aligned to a preschool curriculum. This particular example is focused on supporting stories and rhymes, and as you can see, the messages are developed to relate to class learning each week. On Mondays, parents receive a message that describes a specific skill or focus area that the child is learning. For example, from Miss B, we're exploring stories and rhymes this month. Acting out a story can help children understand the story and its characters. On Wednesdays, parents receive a message that contains an easy game-like activity or a question stem that helps them easily dialogue with their child with topics that are relevant to what's being taught by the teacher. For example, from Miss B, this week, role play a favorite story with your child. Talk about what the characters did and said, and then act it out together. On Fridays, parents receive a quick poll to respond to provide feedback and so that teachers can monitor parent engagement rates. Since launching FASTalk in Oakland schools in 2017, FASTalk's use has expanded to all preschool and elementary schools in the district. Last school year, 18,732 families received information each week to support literacy at home. Oakland families are seeing results using the FASTalk tips and activities. Families have had a very positive experience collaborating with teachers through this tool. One parent commented, "I feel that the text messages that were sent helped me a lot every day to help my son at home and also how to communicate with the teachers and with my son. Thank you so much. I love when I hear stories of how positive parent-teacher relationships benefit the student as well." We are very fortunate to have Olivia Michaelson, a preschool teacher at Burbank, to share more about her perspective on parent engagement using FASTalk.
Thank you, Cecilia. I'm so excited to share my experiences with you all. I'm also going to apologize in advance because there is some yard work happening at my neighbors across the way. So let me know if anything isn't clear or if you want me to repeat something. I'm happy to do that. Anyway, so my first experience and introduction to FASTalk was last year while we were still doing distance learning, and preschool is already a challenge. Any classroom is already a challenge to teach through distance learning, let alone a preschool with special needs. So we had a lot of fun and got really creative, but in order to do that, we needed to have a very clear communication and easy communication with the families. And FASTalk really made a difference. Last year, I had 5 different languages in my classroom, and then we are teaching the children sign so that we have a universal language that the children can use with each other in the classroom in case there's those language barriers. But overall, it supported the ability to do some parent coaching and support different activities that they could be doing at home, especially when all of our families were so anxious and nervous about the potential regression that could happen for their child's development during this year and plus, I guess, year and a half of us not being in the school setting. So it provided different ideas and age appropriate concepts for them to be working with at home. But I think it also helped just generally to provide quick, easy translations. So yeah, I work in OUSD, and OUSD has a lot of diversity, which is so wonderful and makes the day so much more interesting. However, our translation department gets very busy, and it can be challenging to get your translations back quickly if you have a written translation. So it provided opportunity to have a really quick translation. For if you have a family that arrived, you can quickly text them and let them know, or they can tell you, hey, my child is not taking the bus today. I'm going to drop off. Something really simple, but it could also be, my child's having a really hard time with this and this. How could I support them? Or do you have any ideas of how we could do this part of our day differently? And I think it made it more inclusive and generally more interactive. I think that was pretty much the general feedback that I got from my families on my caseload. And it was really, really nice to be able to have that communication and quickly translate whatever I needed for our newsletters. And if a parent had a quick question, I could send them an announcement or remind them, hi, tomorrow I'm not going to be in the classroom, but we're going to have a substitute, that sort of thing. So the parents feel more included. I also think it opened up a lot of access for our kids, access to information, access for the parents to be able to ask questions and feel like they could do that and they were included in this process. And it was a valued partnership, because I am a firm believer in that parents are the experts. And I think they know their child best. So when we're having issues in the classroom, if we're having any challenging behavior, something that might be happening, and we say, hey, I noticed that we're having this and this and this happen during transitions. Is there anything that you guys like to do at home to help support this behavior? And we get really, really wonderful feedback, because the parents know so much more than they realize. I think sometimes we get stuck in this idea that teachers know best. And I think this really starts to break down those barriers using FASTalk. I think that it helps support our ability to communicate, make it more approachable and friendly, but then also just kind of continue to build that rapport. I think that's about all I had to share.
Thank you so much, Olivia. And I know there's so many wonderful stories and experiences that you've had, over especially thinking about the last year with the pandemic, and really excited to hear more of them in the Q&A as well. So just inviting that out there too, if folks want to hear more about a specific experience with using FASTalk and helping to not just share like sort of ideas with families, but also strengthen the underlying relationships and connections that are so important, in building that connection, community, and trust that's needed to support literacy. Excited to talk more about that. But for now, I have a big slide here with a big bar chart on it, so I'm going to go right there. This is about the outcomes. I think there was such an important comment that was made earlier today. I think it was Dr. Anderson who highlighted the importance of not confusing intention with impact or outcomes, and that's something that's been grounding our work from the get-go, which is that ultimately our kids reading better. So here's a quick look at some of the results we saw over the last few years. As you can see here, kindergarten students in Oakland classrooms using FASTalk here in green significantly improved their ELA, or literacy performance, from the fall to the spring semester, where the FASTalk students started the school year pretty far below district's average, but outpaced the district average in ELA performance by spring. And FASTalk has also been shown to accelerate learning of students by half a month to a month in most cases. And more importantly, the impact was most pronounced for students whose families didn't share a language with their teacher. And with that accelerated performance of 1.5 to nearly 3 months ahead of their peers not using FASTalk. And this really speaks not to, our program specifically, but this is parents exercising their power when they have information about literacy and what their kids are doing. And it's even just sharing a little bit of information can go a long way. So when you think about like, oh, it's just, it's taking too long, or even just taking that step and communicating about student learning in a way that's really direct, that's connected to what kids are doing day to day, and breaking down the sort of the professionalism of what's happening in the classroom in a way that's really accessible to families in the home context is extremely powerful. So in breaking down this communication barriers, meeting parents where they are with accessible, timely information from a trusted source and in the parent's home language can really make a difference when it comes to student literacy. So here's our contact information to stay in touch and to hear more about our research and our work here in Oakland and FASTalk. Please follow us on Twitter and Facebook. We also have a family engagement learning series covering a variety of topics each month that are relevant to family engagement, specifically in student learning. And to view past issues, visit our website at familyengagamentlab.org. We're excited to stay in touch. And at this point, I'm so excited that we're sharing the space with an organization that I've been cheering on for many years now, with Alejandro's work in starting in Philadelphia and the amazing research they've started with and have grown incredibly since then. So I'm handing it now to the wonderful team over at Springboard Collaborative.
Hello, everybody. My name is Iralys Lopez, and I am a program director with Springboard Collaborative. Before we begin, I want to say thank you to Vidya and her team. Thank you so much. And let's start off with a small activity. Complete the sentence in the chat. What is family engagement? Or what does it look like and sound like to you? What does family engagement look like and sound like to you? For me, it sounds and looks like parents having conversations with their children, but also with their teacher together. So a three-way conversation between a teacher, a child, and their parent. I see somebody wrote in the chat, full workshops. Yes, and we're gonna talk about family workshops in a little bit. Somebody wrote, family engagement is a bunch of caregivers weighing in on our dreams for our kids and what that means about how we prioritize things in our school community. That is correct, yes. Thank you so much for sharing with us what is family engagement and what does that look like and sound like to you. And so who are we? I just presented myself, but I'm gonna do it again. My name is Iralys Lopez, and I am a program director with Springboard Collaborative. I'm gonna let my coworker present herself.
Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Yareni Carrasco, and I am the Director of Community Support. Unlike Iralys is on the East Coast, so I'm super glad that I get to say good afternoon. I'm usually off on time zones, so I'm really, really happy to be here presenting to you all, who I hope most of you are all in Oakland. And thank you, OLC, and for the amazing introduction, Vidya.
Yes, and lastly, we have Teresa Arriaga. She is our West Coast Executive Director. She's also here on this call. Hey. And she's also in charge of working with the partnerships team within our organization.
We'll go ahead and get started. Why are we here? We want to describe a little bit about how Springboard Collaborative helps family members becoming reading coaches at home. I think given the current situation that our country, if not worldwide climate is in, we need a little bit of reinforcement and just a little bit positivity as to how can we make this happen. And we also hope that when you leave here, you envision how you can take some of the principles of family workshops in your context and take a little bit away from Springboard and hopefully implement it in what has become a totally different ballgame in education.
Here we go. So this is a snapshot of who we are and why we are doing this work. Our big goal in Springboard is to help 100,000 students reach reading goals and 30,000 students read on grade level by 2023. We know that reading and writing go hand in hand with one another. And so we approach this goal in Springboard by capacity building. And how do we do this? We do this by coaching teachers and data-driven instruction to lead students towards reading growth goals and to collaborate with families throughout the process. We also train and equip family members to be effective reading coaches for their children at home. And lastly, we build relationships because, as we know, relationships are the foundation of growth and change. The partnerships that we build with families will lead to lasting reading habits in children that persist over the long term. We want to encourage children to be readers, writers, and lifelong lovers of books.
We heard this a little bit from our previous colleagues, but family engagement matters. Why does it matter? We believe that we are the experts in teaching literacy, behaviors, and other strategic or other skills in terms of education. But we heard it, families really know their kids best. They are their students' first teacher. And obviously, amidst of all the school closures and something that we never imagined happening in education history, teachers are now families are now the #1 teachers at home. We are relying on their support more than ever. There's recent research from Learning Heroes where we're finding out that parents are averaging at least 2.5 hours of educational time at home. And so we want to really highlight here that at Springboard, we're trying and we're creating this framework that's really leveraging off of this and giving them the tools to empower them and do it in a successful way that they also feel empowered as teachers at home.
Okay, so why do we work with families? Why families? Picture a child's time as an orange. Classroom time represents just a small slice of that orange. Yet educators are constantly looking for ways to squeeze more and more out of that tiny slice. But what if we enlisted the help of families to juice the rest of that orange? Effective family engagement enables schools to significantly increase instructional time and dramatically improve educational outcomes. And so we work with families because we want to tap into them as resources so that we can improve educational outcomes. Research by Flamboyant Foundation suggests that there are 5 key family behaviors or roles that lead to student success. Notice in this picture which of these are visible or invisible, or maybe both. We want to empower families to take on these 5 roles that accelerate learning through our family engagement approach or activities at Springboard. The 5 key roles that you see here are centered on the child's academic progress, and supporting the learning at home emerges as having a strong impact on student growth. This is why asking teachers and parents to collaborate together during Springboard's programming components is so crucial. It helps accelerate the learning.
When we were asked to present, we thought about like what really is a highlight here at Springboard, and we automatically thought and went to family workshops. But more than anything, we really want to make sure that we highlight that we decided to have a strong focus on family workshops with some research behind. We heard it mentioned before too by our colleagues that it's twice as more effective when we train families on resources or on tools and are engaged in their students' education. But what the research tells us too is that their children need specific skills that can have a large impact on child literacy. It needs to be very specific, and it needs to be directive information, not general, less directive. And that's what the workshops do. I also think that with these family workshops, we are really highlighting that education is a shared responsibility and that parents are the key players. We also want to really remove, and it's imperative to remove ourselves from that stigma. I think there's a lot of misconception that sometimes we think that families don't want to be engaged. I know that as a previous educator and family engagement coordinator in my past experience, I heard it a lot, like, oh, that family doesn't care. They're not involved. And it's not that they don't want to, they don't know how. They might not know the language, they might not have the capacity to even understand, like, how can I initiate this engagement? And so we have really started to focus on a framework, which is the family workshops, that really tie in that communication between families, teachers, and that collaboration, and also that sense of community with other families that might be in the same situation that they are in. We talked a little bit about the 5 roles with David, and at this time, we would like for you to just keep in mind the 5 roles that Iralys mentioned, and see if you can identify some of those 5 roles within this video. David is one of our fathers who attended our our Springboard program. And this is a little bit of his experience in terms of what he took away from family workshops.
Every day when we come in from the program, first thing you want to do is read. He sit down, he read, he's passionate about it, he's asking questions, he's actually using the phrases that we're taught here. This program is amazing, honestly. Honestly, I can't express how I feel with the progress that my kids have received. I mean, like, me going up to schools and just saying that I read with them every day and I work with them every day, but I'm not seeing no progress, wasn't helping. Me being they coming here and now I can go to the teacher and say, he's having a problem with decoding, or he's having a problem with his predictions, or maybe he's not pausing in between. Things that I really wasn't picking up on is highlighted now and they mean so much. For me to be able to do that is like incredible and it's wonderful.
I'd like to, when I watched this video for the first time, a lot of emotions came about, not just because I don't think I was doing the Springboard work. I think I viewed it as a partner. So I'd like to invite you to take a couple seconds or a minute or so to write in the chat, like, what did this make you feel? What did you notice? What are some takeaways from just watching this short clip?
Great. And now that we heard David's story and experience with our program, let's dive into our approach. Springboard Collaborative's approach to family engagement focuses on a series of evidence-based strategies that we capture in a framework we call FELA, or the Family Educator Learning Accelerator. And so a Family Educator Learning Accelerator is a 5 to 10 week cycle during which teachers and parents share a game plan to help children reach learning goals, plain and simple. The process measurably improves academic outcomes while strengthening family educator relationships. Relationships are foundational. The key to getting 90% parent turnout at weekly workshops is building relationships between teachers and families, whether it is virtual or in person. And this happens through our first step within our journey, which is the team building huddle. During the team building huddle, parents and teachers and the student begin their journey. This is the initial time where they start building relationships with the parent and the student. Then we go to step 2. This is where teachers measure the student's baseline and set a growth goal. Then we move to the journey to step 3. This happens after students' baseline has been determined and the teacher sets a goal for that student. Because we know that goals are the glue that hold everything together. They make the FILA winnable. And so during the 5 to 10 weeks, it's all about practice, 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 which is the step 4 within our journey. This is where kids practice with their teacher, kids practice with their families, they practice by themselves. This is the heart of our program. And we've learned that parents and teachers must practice together at least 4 times throughout family workshops, whether it is virtual or in person, in order to foster a skill sharing environment. Finally, the cycle concludes by measuring progress and celebrating students' growth. The Learning Accelerator works because it zeroes in on what growing readers need most, which is deliberative practice with a caring and knowledgeable adult. They'll get lots of practice with the child's teacher, their family member, and the whole team together. We like to think of the Learning Accelerator as a journey. It's a journey that begins with a clear goal and ends with a party.
Reading well requires both explicit instruction and practice, and families can help with both. We're looking at 4 areas here at Springboard that we believe make up a skilled or a proficient reader, which is accuracy, fluency, comprehension, and engagement. And so the data should really make clear which data of reading for families to focus on. We do that in multiple ways. We do that through a questionnaire that families take or an action plan that the teacher creates for the families. It just depends on what offering the district or the school signs up for. But therefore, we have in mind that the reading tip of the workshop should be actionable. It should be broken into steps. It's written so that the families can easily remember, such as take a picture walk or choosing a right book, using the 5-finger rule. They're really strategies that are applicable even for the students to remember during testing or when they're going to the public library. But it really is empowering both families and students. A skill is a permanent reading habit that we want to help our students cultivate. And reading also requires temporary scaffolding, and which is what we're doing. We're giving our families those tools and those resources to help these skills become permanent reading skills.
Family workshops build parents' capacity to support what teachers are doing in the classroom by taking charge of their children's reading outside of the school. Here at Springboard, both goal setting and modeling or supplying specific reading instruction to parents happens during the family workshop. And so during the family workshop, they receive information on how to support and coach their children's reading at home. Parents more than teachers can really attend to their child through one-on-one time. There's no bigger classroom than a living room, and we've learned this during COVID. And we at Springboard tap into this in order to help students grow.
We wanted to talk a little bit too, like what does the workshop look like? Before I get into that, I also know that before I mentioned a little bit of context, what I was doing before I joined Springboard full time. Part of that was to just really help improve family engagement, which would cultivate like a positive school climate and culture. I cannot name how many times I struggled to get families to attend anything in general, except when Springboard came. Springboard was that one constant where I knew that if I had to have 100 families at the workshops or 45, whatever that number was, that I was going to have 90 to 95 participation. And so I often ask myself, why? Why is it that I'm over here like finding agencies, like breaking my brain, just trying to bring all these things and that they're not highly attended? I remember one of the most powerful things that I saw was, there's also like this stigma or this belief that it's usually the mom that's involved. And when Springboard came, it was the first time that I saw dads coming in their construction gear to make sure that they were there at that family workshop to gain that knowledge, that tool to go back and practice. And I think a lot of it is that they're getting something concrete. They're having an interaction with the teacher for the first time, and it's a positive interaction. They're creating a sense of community with other families that have students within the same like level of comprehension, same level of fluency. They're able to share best practices and see what worked, what didn't work. There's one thing that I also heard and constantly hear, it's mine and my son's or mine and my daughter's time. I get home and I have to cater to my other 3 kids. And this just created a totally different like relationship dynamic between mine and my student, because this is our time. So what better way to make, that type of relationship, instilling some reading skills and comprehension or whatever the focus is. So the families go through a workshop, and then they leave with the reading tip sheet where we highlight the strategy that they learned for the week. And then there's questions for families to ask. Usually all of our strategies have follow-up questions so that they can go home and practice that strategy for the week, or create like a little folder of all these strategies for them to use, not only with their one student that's in Springboard, but with the rest of their children if they have any. There's a section where they interact and play, because we obviously want to make it interactive and we want to make it fun. And obviously the number one thing that we want for kids to do is to enjoy reading. So how can we make this more enjoyable? And then practice. What does that practice look like? So they leave with something tangible aside from the interactions and the workshop facilitation that they go through for a duration of about 5 weeks.
Resources we would like to share, I'm going to put it in the chat. There we go. If you'd like a PDF version of a sample family workshop deck, I just put it in the chat for everybody to be able to have access. Just fill out the form and you will receive a sample from Springboard. And to learn more about Springboard programs, please contact Teresa Arriaga at tarriaga@springboardcollaborative.org.
Before we leave, I also wanted to just acknowledge the chat. I saw a lot of like, okay, this is really empowering, not just for the families. And that's probably the biggest takeaway that I had during COVID. Somebody asked me like, oh, how's the tech use? I'm like, you know what? We are not only empowering families on reading skills, we are empowering some of these families that have never had to use technology for education. We are also empowering family English language learners or families of color that really don't have these reading comprehension skills. I've noticed families going back and saying like, you know what, I'm going to learn how to read because I'm telling my kid to learn how to read. I need to learn myself. I'm going to take this skill and practice it myself. So it really does come in full circle, which is why I love the work that we do. Family engagement is my passion. Like everybody else on this call, I believe they are the first teachers. And as educators, they are our number one underutilized tool. And it's not that we don't want to, it's just, I think we also don't know how. The same way families don't know how to become engaged with us, we don't know how to engage them. And I think frameworks like ours and frameworks like the Family Engagement Lab is just one step ahead of where we're going in terms of really, really like honing into family engagement.
Okay, thank you so much. That was really empowering. I just want to, we're not wrapping up yet. I definitely want to make sure that people don't start to stream off here, but I want to say a quick thank you to Family Engagement Lab and Springboard Collective. I know for myself, I've heard some of those comments of, I don't know why families, aren't engaging, or they just don't want to, or this is a really great conversation about the models for engagement and how we can kind of create more equitable relationships between families and schools. So we might move into the moderated questions. And I know that there've been a few questions that folks have been answering as they come up in the chat box. I've been collecting them as well. So we might give everybody a chance to answer them right at the end if they haven't had that chance already. But we might get started. We'll go one for one with Springboard Collective. So the question here for you guys is, what kind of tools do families need to continue to use what you guys offer?
Yes, I'll answer this one. From our program, the kind of tools that family need in order to continue to replicate what we offer, first is the reading tip sheets that they receive during the family workshop in order for them to continue to practice the reading strategy at home. The second tool that they have available to them is our Facebook Live recordings of family workshops, reading tips, different lessons, so that they can review family workshops and different literacy strategies that they can implement at home. With the Facebook Live recordings, we also have a YouTube page that is accessible to everybody in families. They can also go there and watch our videos to implementing instruction. We also provide family books at the beginning of programming so that family members can practice the reading strategies at home. They get to keep those. They don't return them. They get to keep those books. Another tool that they have is communication tools. As we saw in the video, David was mentioning literacy terms like decoding. We're training parents to be able to have those conversations with their child about what they're learning in the classroom and implement it in their homes. And then the last is RAS access and knowledge on its usage. We give during programming access to parents and students to RAS, and that is a library that they can use during the program and after the program. If they have it in their school, they already know that that's a resource that they can tap into in order to continue to implement reading strategies at home with their child.
Thank you for that, Iralys. I might direct this question specifically to Olivia, who is hanging out with us from OUSD, but with the Family Engagement Lab. So what feedback have you received from families and educators about the program?
So that's a great question. I actually received a lot of feedback from the families that they just enjoyed that it was, that they felt like they had more access to me as a teacher, especially during a time when everything felt so isolated. So that was really, really helpful for them. And I think for me in a big way. But I've also heard from other educators, because we were partnering with Hannah, who works with FASTalk, that she was very responsive, really quick to adjust what we needed. So originally I was transitioning from another translation application in the beginning of the year, and we started implementing FASTalk in September. And so my families were transitioning from the previous one to the new one, and we needed some time before some of those messages that were sent out on Monday, Wednesdays, and Fridays were sent out. So she just put a pause for my class. She was really responsive, really quick, because I thought it was going to be too overwhelming for the families, that they weren't sure where all of the messages were coming from or who to respond to. So I know that the other educators and I just appreciated their responsivity.
That is very relevant right now. Very, very relevant. Springboard Collaborative. I know I got that wrong before. Collaborative, I had a brain fumble. What are some ways that we can continue to empower families? I know that a lot of the folks that are here joining us as participants and attendees definitely want to take this down as a note.
Yeah, for us, we continue to think that teaching them the educational terms around literacy, I saw that all over our chat, empowering them. I know that when like standardized testing results come back, or even report cards, there's a lot of this jargon that even for like only us educators would probably know how to interpret what that looks like. And so really just educating them on what those terms will look like, equipping them to have conversations at home with their child and with their teacher around those reading habits and what that practice looks like. And also just building the parents' confidence, making sure that they are seen as collaborators and an integral tool like in their children's learning, and helping them become reading coaches. Like what does that look like? Giving them strategies that are tangible, that are easy to read, replicate. I think it's it's super, super important. I read it a lot too in the chat, like self-esteem. And I do believe that once that is built, the engagement comes a lot easier, and they're more willing to participate and really just be there in the education of their children.
I love that, self-esteem being a key for that. Our question here for Family Engagement Lab. What do you think is most important for organizations doing family-focused work to know about supporting literacy?
I can start. I'd love for my colleagues to join in as well in addressing this question. I think it really connects, I think, to what Yareni was talking about with respect to sort of breaking down some of the terms of literacy to make sure that families have clear access to what's happening. But I think what's very important related to that is understanding that the context of learning extend beyond the confines of a classroom now, and even beyond the confines of a home environment. That learning is really something that's happening everywhere, and that the wonderful thing about I think this moment is that people like viscerally know that. Like there's no doubt about that right now, if there ever was before. And so I think one thing that I would really highlight is that if you're on the fence about doing anything family focused in your organization and you're wondering if it's something the families really want, they want it. Like they really want to be involved. They want to be engaged. They want to be connected to their child's learning experience. And I think the other thing that's very important for family focused work is to recognize that it's not just the knowledge that's important, but it's also the relationships that are important. You can't have one without the other. And when you're talking about learning and literacy. So that's why I'm really excited about the title of this, because it implies like unity and relationship and the connection to building knowledge, competency around supporting learning.
Yeah, Vidya, I think you touched on all the points. So I'm only going to reinforce what you said. Parents want to be involved. I used to teach, and so whenever I would ask for like, what's like keeping you from like supporting your child, and a lot of it is, I don't understand the language, or I don't understand what they're learning, because when they come home, they don't talk about it. They don't know, you ask a 6-year-old, what did you do today? They're like, I don't know. What did I do today? Yeah, definitely parents want to be involved. And when they're receiving information firsthand on like, this is what your child is learning, this is what you can do at home, or these are the new vocabulary words we're teaching this week, or, parents are learning alongside with their children, especially if they're non-native English speakers. So there is kind of like a twofold with educating both the students, but you're also kind of also educating families, right, that don't speak English, and you're giving them the toolkit that is needed to support their child's success in school. And I think that's really important to recognize that there's a lot of families that don't speak English as a first language, and they need that accessibility to be able to continue or to be involved in their child's learning.
I love that. There's so much learning that goes on in these spaces. And it's also, apart from students and families being part of that learning process, there's so much for schools and those instructional institutions to also learn from families. So I love all of those points. Springboard Collaborative, this is gonna just kind of continue the conversation. And I know you've already mentioned it, but let's just drill it home. Why work with families?
Yes. So I want to go back to that analogy that I had mentioned before about the orange, because I just can't stop thinking about that. We know that children spend more time with their parents. They spend more time at home with the family than they do either at school or with other people. And so We at Springboard want to capitalize on this by having parents learn how to collaborate in their child's learning. And as Vidya said, parents want to be engaged. They want to be involved in their child's learning. And we tap into this knowledge in order to elevate and make sure that the student's educational experience is more meaningful. We work with families because as educators and as people that work with children, we believe that parents are an integral source of knowledge. They're the ones that are experts in their children's learning and development. And so this collaborative effort is going to help us and help the students reach immense gains in literacy. And also it just elevates their educational experience. It brings another sense into what they learn at school and what the conversations that they have at home.
Okay, and we have a final question here. You guys have been so efficient with your time and your words, so we're running a little bit ahead of time, which is good. Our question here is for Family Engagement Lab. How does working with families help educators? And this is a really great question as well. I might direct this to Olivia.
Yeah, so I think that it helps in a lot of ways. I think being an educator, it's really helpful to know what's happening outside. So just like Iralys was saying, that it is like that orange. We get a little bit of time with the kids and we're doing whatever interventions we're doing right now, but without that consistency outside of the classroom, they're only getting a little bit of an exposure. So I think that really maximizing on that support and that partnership with the families can really engage everyone, but then reinforce some of those strategies that we're using inside the classroom.
Thank you all very much. That's really great. I think
Aaliyah, I was wondering if there were some questions that came up in the chat that I particularly one about librarians. I'd be happy to answer. You were gonna okay.
I'm gonna get into all of that. We're not going anywhere anytime soon.
Oh, okay, I was wondering.
So I just want to quickly point out that there were some questions in the chat box. And some of them are organizational specific, but I think it'd be really great if you guys could also just drop, I know you've done it already, but maybe do it again, some of your links for contact, for future contact. But there was a really great question here about, I think it was specific to FASTalk, but I think it'd be really great to hear from Springboard Collaborative as well. Where can, like specifically, where can your tools be used, and where would people start if they're interested in engaging with the work that you're doing? Anyone can jump in at this point.
Sure. I'm sorry for jumping in earlier, Elia. So the contexts that we work in are quite ranging. We do work as we shared in the sort of traditional district setting. But we also have other types of partnerships with different types of schools. So, I mean, we work with charter schools. We work with also different types of early childhood settings as well. So if you're interested in learning more, I put my email in the chat, and it was there earlier. You can reach me at either Vidya at fasttalk.org, 1T, or Vidya at familyengagementlab.org. And I'm happy to share more and answer questions. Any others want to answer that?
Maybe someone from Springboard, if you guys just want to give folks, I know you've done it already in through your slides, but maybe just a quick heads up.
Yeah, I can go ahead and do that. We have designated people for each coast. Teresa would be the one to contact. I think if you weren't able to scan the barcode or grab the link from the last slide in terms of resources, I think that would be a great start to see if our model would even interest you. I think it gives like a quick, like what does the lesson for teachers look like? What does the family workshop look like? Kind of like a really quick rundown and example. So if you didn't get it there, I know the slide decks will be shared, so you can go ahead and just click there. But yeah, it would be either Iralys or Teresa who works closely with new partners.
And also, if you go to our Springboard page, here's a plug. There is a section for teacher resources where you can definitely, as an educator or non-educator, you can definitely go in there and get more resources from us to get started on what is the FELA journey and how you can implement it into your school.
Thank you. There was another question here that I think was when you guys were presenting Iralys. So I just want to give you a chance to answer here. Are English-speaking students and families represented in the work that you do? For example, Black students and families.
I put a little bit of a description in chat, but the centering of Black families' needs, voices, and experiences is something that we focused on even before we developed anything. We started with a series of listening sessions, not just in Oakland, but around the Bay Area as well, to understand the needs of families and making sure that we had a lot of representation from families that whose voices weren't always at the table or represented, and particularly thinking about how to be responsive to the needs of a wide range of families. So representation is really important in the context of design. The other thing that we did in design too was it was an active process as well. And so like we would talk about options, and like we would make decisions based on, you know, community feedback and input on how we created the content, the design of our program with Oakland families. And we were not funded by the district to do this. So we had to put a pretty independent lens on this and be really community led. So that was a key part of the design process, how we hold ourselves accountable to that, and making sure that we're not only accountable to the voices, but also to ultimately the outcomes around student learning, is that we work really closely on gathering data and separating it out by race, by their like language, even home language. And we look across these different indicators to make sure that we're not masking, you know, any needs, or you know, there may be like, you know, if there are certain communities that may have more access or less access, which is something we actually found the first year when we implemented FASTalk, was that like teachers in schools that were serving more Black students were not as effective at getting buy-in participation. And so we changed our sign up and enrollment model because we were looking at data by race and saw that those differences there. So that at the participation level, looking at the data by race, ethnicity, and other the data that we collect and is available to help us understand equity and access is really important. And finally, in the results and outcomes, when we look at student achievement data and are able to connect it to specifically to our work, we are looking at that information separated by race. So it's like, and it's like we have to do that. That's not even a question.
And I can respond on behalf of Springboard very similarly to what Vidya said. We have teams designated for data analysis, for curriculum implementation and revamping of curriculum. One thing, because again, it's very similar to their process in terms of having teams that do that specific work. Very recently, we've always had focus groups at the end of each partnership or each program session. Recently, we launched a family advisory group where there's all of our families are families of color. And we bring to them part of our programming, part of our curriculum, part of tech implementation, and we give them the platform and the voice to tell us, does this work? does this not? Why? And what would be an alternative? We go back to the teams that are in charge of whatever part we're presenting on, and we go from there and we help revamp or redesign things that are including the voices of our families, because at the end of the day, they are our end users. So there's a little bit of everything that we're trying to do to really address, include our families of color in our process and our implementation, as well as that it's no secret that our program is very predominant in underserved communities. I know at Alum Rock, we are about 60% Spanish-speaking families when I was there, and Springboard has been there for the last 6 years. And I mean, that I think in itself speaks into how we address or how we include, I don't want to say address, how do we include our families of color or our English language learner family or English language learners in our program?
Thank you both. That was really thorough. And again, obviously, there's all the contact details in the chat box here, so you can find out more information. We do have one last question that we'll try and address maybe as quickly as possible, just because we are running short on time here now. And it's a question specific to public libraries. So what do public librarians need to know to support either of these programs or the entire process of reading acquisition? That's a great question, Erica.
Happy to jump in. I think it's a fantastic question too. I think the main thing I would share is, and also for any organization here that is not directly connected, it doesn't have a direct connection point with families, FASTalk right now is, has been texting, providing literacy information to more than 18,000 students' families in Oakland every week. So 2 to 3 times a week, families are getting information in their home language. We're supporting the Academic Milestones Initiative from OUSD. We provide, there's links to Sora. There's information that's like happening in the community that we're sharing out to families, like at quite a large scale, like on their phones by text. And so with, so through the district, if you have a connection to the district and there are initiatives that you'd like to, help share with your communities, we're, just to be aware that this is a channel that is active, connected to literacy, and that families are using and educators are using to connect around literacy.
Yeah, I actually really love this question. I think as part of forming community, I don't know why we haven't tapped into our public library sector, which brings up so many other ideas. But yeah, I mean, I think having some of these tools accessible to like RAS kits, I know that it's very specific to certain schools or districts that have them, but if libraries were to access some of those licenses and, allowed families to use them or something like that, having reading tips too, very visible or like tangible, like tip sheets to take home or recommendations of the month. And here's like let's plug in a strategy for you to practice. And this is what it looks like. One thing that, especially now that we're going really digital due to our climate, and that I've heard families saying a lot is, I hear you and I get that you want me to practice this, but I also need some modeling. So what does that look like? So including some like videos on your websites on what does that look like, practice it. Those are all, I think, very, very supportive and collaborative ways. And I love that we can potentially tap into a resource like this. So thank you for bringing up that question.
I love that there are still questions going on in the chat box. I am just conscious of time, so I might ask folks to continue the conversation over at the Hoover platform. I know there's a couple of questions that we're probably not going to get to right now, but like I said, the Hoover platform, where you guys have already signed in through, is kind of where the party is happening right now. So feel free to head over there and add your questions there. I do want to just highlight that this is our 3rd session. We do have one more our closing plenary this afternoon, which is at 2:10 p.m. So please do join us in that space as well. But let me take a moment to acknowledge and thank all of our facilitators and speakers this afternoon. Thank you to Family Engagement Lab, and thank you for Springboard Collaborative. Thank you, Vidya, Iralys, Yareni, Olivia, and Cecilia. It's been a really great conversation, and one that I hope and have faith in the fact that people will continue to engage in moving forward. Please do reach out to any of our speakers here if you've got any more questions. And before you do log off, I just want to mention that we have our OLC session survey in the chat box. Please do make sure that you click on that before you log off and answer the very few questions that will kind of inform how we do what we do. And on that note, again, please join me in thanking our facilitators and speakers one last time for a really empowering afternoon conversation. Thank you all, and we'll see you hopefully this afternoon in the closing plenary, and we'll continue these conversations tomorrow. Have a good afternoon, folks.